So right now I'm on the enterprise tooling design system where we provide support for all of our internal tools here at Meta. So we have a thing at Meta that's very uh, popular for us called like fixathons, which is just like the version of hackathon where we go and fix things. I want to get 80% adoption, but what does that lead to? Does it lead to more revenue? File performance has been a major issue for us now, where
Hello, hello. So, for those of you that didn't listen to Design System office hours yet, and you don't know Davy, probably you live under the rock, I would say. So, for those of you, Davy, can you introduce yourself and share what are your latest projects and what you're working on?
yeah, hi, I'm Davey Fung. I'm a product designer here at Meta, supporting enterprise design systems. Been here almost about 3 years. Some of you in the community may know me from our podcast, which is also approximately 3 years old now, Design System Office Hours. So very, very happy to be here and talk to you, Rabia.
Yeah, this is the second interview. And people can still read it, but probably in 1 year a lot of things change. So maybe we can start with what changed. I mean, from your understanding, what you learned.
hmm Yeah, so from that end, from the amount of design systems, that hasn't really changed all that much here. I'm an IC individual contributor, so I'm not managing the 20. I'm on one of the 20. I just happened to move from one team to another team. So right now I'm on the enterprise tooling design system where we provide support for all of our internal tools here at Meta. And in terms of amount of tools, there's a very long tail. So there's thousands of tools. Like anything could be a tool. Think about a small thing that could gather data and produce a dashboard. That could be a tool, or it could be one of our larger tools, say like calendar, or we have a very large tool that is more or less like a Jira or a Asana replacement that is like tasks and managing that. So those are like our larger tools or utilized by everybody. But right now, I'm on the team that has, in terms of like React component usage, the largest system here. I think that the biggest change for me personally was going from a team that was primarily focused on like monetization, making money, selling ads, and supporting that, to a more broader scope team that not only supports like our those general tools, but a very, very long tail of developer tools that are sometimes very hard to sort of wrap my head around, because an example of a tool may be there's a tool that we use to sort of allocate like data center space. So that's a tool that maybe like a customer listening to the podcast would not really interact with. I personally wouldn't interact with it myself, but we would have to design for something like that.
But are those tools just internal?
So the difference for me now is previously my system was consumer facing. Now all of my tools are completely internal. So no one from the outside utilizes these specific tools.
Uh-huh. Okay, but are there any components that you actually share between teams, or are we talking about completely different design systems?
Completely different. Yeah. So I think the challenge there is the two systems that I've worked on here are very similar. So they fall under like an underlying like meta brand. So like our color tokens are derived from there. The difference is my previous system is solely made to be utilized externally for consumers, and our components now in my system are solely made to like work internally. Currently, there's no crossing. There are teams that sometimes have internal tools, but maybe a external portion of it, so they would use both systems. So like I think that sort of goes to show like there are cases in the meta design system ecosystem where you could be utilizing two systems at one time.
But do you think for you that there's less pressure if you're working on internal products and again then internal design system?
Uh, Likely there's less people that see them. And when I say less people, like our ads tools are used by millions of people. So obviously, we don't have millions of employees. We have, I think, approximately somewhere under 100,000, 70 to 100,000. So the scope of that is smaller, but it's a more targeted group. I would say probably the main benefit of working on internal tooling is because it's for our own customers, we're able to launch and deploy stuff like much quicker. When we were working on external products focused on like monetization, we would have to run experiments that sometimes take up to 6 months to execute, just based on like the sensitivity of the changes. But we're able to move much quicker, and if we could align on, let's say, I had updated some token colors for like error validation. Those I ran under an experiment for a short amount of time, let's say like a week or so. Uh, had those that were close to me QA the work live, and if there were no issues, we would then just launch those colors in the wild. Similarly, if we had any issues, we're able to pull stuff back very quickly without any issues.
So you get more feedback from people that are using, because I would assume that people are regularly using the components and then when they need something they would come to you easily.
Yeah, we get a lot of feedback. Yeah, we get and I never imagined. So like working on internal tools and developer tools specifically, I never imagined that folks would have such great feedback on things like dark mode or colors. But I think when we're um, fussing and messing with theming and changing what they use every day, of course, they're going to give like feedback on, say, like a dark mode tone. Even looking at like we're recording this on Riverside, like looking at the interface around Riverside, it's not fully like rich black. It's a little lighter. And like I would give feedback if I were working on this. Oh, like maybe the background of our app should be a little more rich black. So then you could have more different tiers of elevation and dark mode.
Are you able to share what's the structure of your team? I mean, how many developers are contributing to this design system, or you have rotational roles and you see based on the
Nope.
work?
Yeah. So a lot of our teams are approximately somewhere between like 5 to 7 designers. So when I joined our team last year, we were about 4 designers. We grew to about 6. We're about 6 designers now with a manager. On the engineering side, it's roughly one to one, which unfortunately doesn't put us in a great place with like velocity, because we're always going to be able to design stuff, and engineers are going to have to like follow along and keep up. The ratio, this always seems to be that way at Meta. There's not an ability to have more engineers than designers, for instance. In terms of the other people that are around us that contribute, we have a very good, I would say, like a developer advocate community around us on tooling, where a lot of these folks want to contribute back and do fixes. So they participate in hackathons. So we have a thing at Meta that's very uh, popular for us called like fixathons, which is just like the version of hackathon where we go and fix things. We fix accessibility bugs, design bugs, all sorts of stuff. And that community group has dozens of people, but there's probably like a handful of people there that are very high level contributors that, and if you go look at like the pull request count, like they're on par possibly with like a core engineer on our team. Like they're doing a lot of stuff.
But are these hackathons happening often, or is it once per year?
The hackathon we do every 6 months, and then we alternate and then do like the fixathon version. So we have two of these community events per year on my team. Well, a lot of the participants are engineers that are utilizing the system. So we do get designers that contribute, but a large portion of the help that we get are engineers. We would love more designer contribution, but I think like the back of the napkin count of how many people we're supporting. I think if I were to estimate, designers might be around 300-ish designers that build tools here, but there might be 5,000-ish like engineers that utilize the system.
Wow, that's a lot. But if we rewind a little bit back, I guess it's completely different when you have a design system for consumer facing apps and now for internal. Do you also need to create reports or have some kind of a buying process, or how does this look like? I mean, who started this design system? Because I don't hear often that people build design systems for internal team. Of course, Meta is huge, and the story is a little bit different, but still, it's I guess it's important to also share for the stakeholders and then for the everyone that's above what's going on with this design system and where the money goes.
Yeah, I think it was approximately like over 5 years ago. The my manager and my lead engineer uh, had created the very like early steps of creating this design system, and the I think the need for this was there were some legacy systems, even legacy back then, that they wanted to up level and like bring across tooling at Meta, and they were looking forward and seeing that there. I think at that time there was already a cross Meta like brand system that helped deliver all the tokens and spacing and all the like the foundational things, but we would rely on our product specific design systems to execute that. So that was like over 5 years ago. The I think the growth beyond that is we develop very extremely flexible components that sometimes don't have a lot of editorial point of view, and we allow for the specific products to execute and utilize those. I think over time, um, based on like best practices, we've been a little more interested in developing like moving towards like a pattern based point of view. So we also have a notion of that we call them product systems, but they're really just maybe local systems or satellite systems that utilize like our core system, and we've been helping teams stand those up. So that's what we're moving and putting more effort into. So there's like the core system, and sitting next to us are all of these different product specific compositions of our system.
Hmm. But do you gather then? You mentioned that you have that 5 years ago you made this foundational stuff like design tokens and some of the components. But do you still gather with other leaders or contributors to share the best practices, or have some kind of a portal where you share all this news? Um,
Yeah, we have a like 2 years ago that we spun up we call it like a design systems summit, but it's a internal design systems conference. I've been able to attend and speak and do. There's so many people that are doing like good design systems work here. So both times I was able to give a talk. Um, One was about just scaling and the different things that I saw that at coming to Meta, what practices that I've done at smaller companies that did not quite work. I think in the interest of folks wanting to work fast, sometimes we work in a more like startup mentality, and those practices don't simply work at our scale. But we utilize like a design systems like conference to share ideas once a year. We also have it's like an internal Facebook group that has a few hundred designers and engineers in there. We share design system stuff from time to time. I may share like I don't share the podcast often in there, but if into design systems time comes, I'll share that in there, and we share a lot of community resources in that channel.
Mhm. So it's not just like, oh, I update this button, use it, but it's also like just helping others to learn about design systems, etc.
Yeah, and there's lots of like sometimes they might sound like smaller projects, but they're like wide-reaching things. So, things that we might be sharing in that group is if someone has like a new concept of like spacing tokens, where they're utilizing like different sizes and they want to like get feedback on that, they might share that there. If someone we just uh, started implementing a new font, and the new font is a variable not variable width, variable. It supports variable sizes. So uh, that we would write like a little like case study on, talk about what are the challenges and like positive aspects of moving to a variable font, and we would share those types of tidbits to the community to get people excited um, to do new stuff. We also had recently went and did a large pilot on like Figma's dev mode and the uh, Code Connect. That's what it's called. And that was like a little write up that I did and I posted in that community.
Mhm. So what's then the next step? So for example, you did the case study, you did the pilot, and then after you learn what are the pros and cons, who decides if this is a good approach or not? Or are there any other
Uh,
options then, that you also test and then you compare?
Yeah, the Code Connect for us, it wasn't a good fit just because we have a lot of different our props on our components like are go very wide. So I think Code Connect, in my opinion, works very well for like simpler components that don't have a lot of dependency. So it didn't work very well for us, but we did need to pilot and try it out to understand whether that was a good fit. Usually what happens here is there's for that Code Connect project, there was another larger, wide reaching tooling team that was involved with facilitating that. We were like the first team to help them. They would go around, work with different teams to pilot specific processes, and then try it more or less just try it again. So like the next team that was interested in trying it was like Instagram's design system team. So they would run through it and see if it was a good fit for them. And if it's something that provides value for multiple teams and the design leadership within the team sees it as a net positive, then it could be something that could be spread across, not required, but like an opt-in process for teams.
But do you also compare then some kind of metrics? How much time did you spend on this compared to previous workflow? Or I mean, I guess it's hard to justify, what's a better tool? Because probably I would assume that even for design tokens, if you want to manage them, you need to create your own tool because you're not allowed to use the ones that are on the market.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'll answer both of those specifically. So like the Code Connect one, it's hard. Like we could survey people. Like we that's like a big part of the culture, sending out qualitative surveys just to understand whether like a specific thing that we launched helps save designers and engineers time. The Code Connect stuff is fuzzy because we're asking engineers to go into a design tool, Figma, to get code snippets when they could go likely much faster, go into the code base and search for the code snippets themselves, or go to the documentation which they may be more familiar with. So it's a little bit of like a toss up, maybe something that doesn't fit specifically into their like workflow. Design tokens, great example. So we I think to the sadness of many designers, like they've asked about when it was called Figma tokens, they asked a lot about that and utilizing that for many years now. But uh, for token management, we have our own like internal tooling that we've built to manage that. And usually when Figma does launch something, like the token management, we try to see if we could like attach ourselves and build on top of that. Unfortunately, I think their implementation and for our usage is like so-so. So we're sort of just building on top of that and seeing like how far we could get with that. We would love to use other token management systems, but we're not allowed to.
Yeah, I guess it's also a security issue and then all the rest of the stuff. Yeah. But do you also use some kind of token inventory? So, for example, if you are one in the internal design systems team right now, and then you also have a bunch of other design systems, and I would assume that some of tokens duplicate. Do you use some kind of inventory or a list of tokens that exist or they can reuse? Or this is completely on a decision about every design systems team?
Yeah, it's up to each team. We would I think that I would love if the tokens were like if there's like an overarching brand system, if we were able to pull from it and be a dependency of that. But right now they're individual. Um, how do you say, like they're individual like sets of tokens. So even if there was like a larger meta like brand system set of tokens, we would instance that and we would have ours. So if theirs changes, ours doesn't necessarily change, which it's good and bad. We don't get stuff automatically, but it's much safer for ours to be separate. In terms of the sets themselves, we try to align on what the larger meta brand is. But the one thing that I've seen both on the business side and then now the tooling side is a lot of the different attributes of the brand system may be I would say more broad. So some of the colors may be created to be more vibrant, for instance. And like when we get to things like error validation and like the red, greens, and yellows, some of those colors may be too vibrant for error messaging. So then we would then work with the brand team to say, oh, in terms of like the tops and bottoms of your color ramp, we need a little more flexibility to lighten the chroma and these specific colors. Like, is this acceptable? And luckily, like they've been super open to different changes and updates that we've been proposing.
Hmm. Do you also use some kind of accessibility checkers like automatic, or is this not the case in your particular design system team right now?
Ooh, I just forgot I didn't answer the last part of the question. So, in the tokens, we have like a certain view, like each documentation site has a specific part for color, so it's a pretty standard readout. Um, for accessibility, we have like our own plugin that we've been building that we've been trying to get uh, more designers to utilize. So you run this internal plugin in Figma, and it'll tell you different contrast ratios and what may be in compliance or non-compliance for double A specifically. And then one thing that is like just a very simple thing that it checks for, but people sometimes don't bother to use the plugin, unfortunately, because you have to opt in and you have to run it. But it'll sniff if you're utilizing tokens from different libraries, which is quite common because people are copying and pasting things in and out of files. Also, people are copying and pasting components from different libraries, maybe intentionally, maybe not. So our plugin sniffs for that too.
Uh-huh, so then you need to change the colors. Nice.
Yeah, I
That's
think
quite
that's
helpful.
that's that's the toughest thing. Yeah, like across different systems, like the colors may seem very similar to each other, and this to the naked eye, you may not know that it's one color from, let's say, the Facebook system, and then one color from like the internal tool system. They may be the same, but in some cases, maybe they're not, or maybe there's like a slight shift to the color to make it more saturated or desaturated. So, yeah, we rely very heavily, at least the system maintainers ourselves, to run these plugins to make sure that we're pulling from the right place.
Are there any people, I mean, since it's internal design system, are there any people that resist using design system? Because I'm not sure what's the process. For example, you're building your internal tool. Probably they need to create some screens. And then once the screens are confirmed, you start developing them. But are there any people that don't use design system? Or is it mandatory to use the design system and components that exist for your product?
Yeah, we don't have like an ironclad, like 100%. Like you're supposed to use the system. From like an adoption point of view, I don't think we have an issue with people starting to use the system and using parts of it. So, token adoption is extremely high. Like I think as we go a little further down the line. Token adoption is fairly high. Like our more foundational components are fairly high. But what I think we need to get more people to use is like a perfect example is like a list component. We have more people that utilize like list cells and they build their own list component themselves for a variety of reasons. Maybe they need like a larger list. Maybe they need more flexibility in um, the header and the footer functionality, but we would love more people to utilize like a larger size components. And I think that's why we're looking to move more towards the pattern and template space in the coming year.
But what happens? For example, I don't use the list component. I would rather use two separate components. What happens then in the engineering side? Because then they spend more time, developing the screens.
If they were, I think if they were a engineer that like participates actively in the community, usually they would chime in and ask if there's something that they could use that may work out of the box. Or oftentimes they'll come back to us and say, "Oh, we have this component that you have the list component that works, but it doesn't have this additional prop." Or it doesn't have, we want to create a separate header for it. And then most of the times, then we would try to triage and give feedback to that asynchronously as quick as we can in the support group and try to see if we could contribute and bake that in. Oftentimes, we'll just say, oh, that's fine. This may not seem like it's directly applicable to apply back to the system, but you're fine to go ahead and create like your local header for this.
Mhm. And how do you come together as a team? So do you have weekly meetings? Do you have projects, for example, let's build a list component and then you meet and yeah, what's your collaboration technique or frameworks that you use for coming together as a team and then also with the other that are building the same products?
Yeah, design system critique is so interesting to me because you would think, I think from being a product designer ourselves previously, like I was a product designer before specializing in design systems, like in the last 5 years. I would design something and then I would bring it to crit, and this was like something that end to end I had done myself. But design system maintainers and folks that work in design systems, oftentimes we may not be bringing something that we've developed end to end. So what we might bring is a question about this list header, and I would then take it into Figma in one window, look at the code snippet in the other window, and say, "Oh, let me compare and contrast and see if I could manipulate this to create this with what we have existing." So I would do it in code, see how far I could get just in like a code pen style, just do that. I would take it into Figma and manipulate it, and then I would bring that my findings into crit. And it's a little strange because we're then essentially bringing things to crit that we didn't design, but we're trying to solve somebody else's problem in like a support channel. And we would do this. We have this crit weekly. We would go through this. Engineers now also have their version of crit, which is more around like a structure, scaffolding of components. Am I like building these components properly? Am I building this API properly? And that's also like a weekly meeting that we do. Designers are invited to that, but we're not required to attend the engineering crit.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's what I thought. It was not my intention to have or critique like end to end, but all the challenges that arise when building a component or choosing what works best or user flow. Yeah. Um, so, what would you say is the most helpful thing when you're collaborating with your team? What would be your advice here? Because a lot of people struggle to give feedback and then also build design systems or maybe even prioritize work.
Yeah, I come from the point of view that as long as it's composed with system things, if it's compliant, meaning like it's utilizing the things, the tokens, the core components, and you compose it in a unique fashion, I think that's acceptable. It doesn't need to use components one to one because we're not going to be able to facilitate the creation of those. So if someone needed, I'll give in the header example specifically. If someone needed a very robust list or table header and they needed it, let's say within like the month, we may not be able to prioritize creating that ourselves and putting it back in the system because this requires too many different steps. We would have to develop the component from like a design and engineering point of view, take it through the crits. We would then have to demo the component in a team demo. We would then have to send it back to the engineers and the designers on that team to QA the component, and all of that would take longer than it would take longer than a month for us to do. And that's also asking us to um, take this in without knowledge of what we're prioritizing and what we're doing currently. So in my mind, I'm a little more flexible from that point of view. I would love uh, in the case where someone's developing something that is like a custom proposition to consider whether they could go a little more broad and then we could bring it eventually back into the system. But there's so many engineers that utilize it. I think as long as they're in good faith utilizing it as best as they can and building custom compositions with our things, I think that's acceptable.
Mhm. How would your advice changed since you also worked in smaller organizations than Meta? Also, previously, you spent quite a lot of time at Disney, but what worked there? Because the team was smaller, and would your advice change based on that?
Yeah, I think previously we would we would want people to use stuff like one to one, like you would almost need to be completely derived from the system. Uh, it's a push and pull because we don't want to be in a spot where we're blocking people, not only from like the optics of it, but we also don't want to come back and say have folks tell us that, oh, the design system team uh gave us feedback on this and we were not able to launch this in time because we needed to go back and rebuild this. So we don't want to be in a position to do that. I think other teams that measure adoption more aggressively may give you a different idea of that. Like we're not measuring for 100% uh, component adoption. So I think we're able to be a little more flexible.
I mean, I totally agree. In some cases, I mean, adoption, what does it tell you? I think that if you compare your time to value, whatever your value or goal is, that's the most precious metric, I guess. Mm,
Yeah,
what?
I think that's the hardest thing. Like people when they get into design systems automatically just anchor on adoption and getting some product owners will say I want to get 100% adoption and then folks will say I want to get 80% adoption, but what does that lead to? Does it lead to uh more revenue? Does it lead to solving your business objectives? Does it lead to time saved? So there's many other things I think you can anchor on other than just the pure adoption metric.
Did you have some kind of metrics in place in your previous team? I mean, I don't mean Disney, but at Meta, where you were doing consumer facing apps.
We were measuring, so the linting plugin that we have also has measurement for like component adoption and like token adoption. So in my mind, we were like the first layer was just making sure that everything was tied to tokens. So the inferred thought was if you are using all of our tokens in the design implementation, that the hope is that when folks are developing it, that it's going to utilize the tokens because we have those available. So it's inferred. Um, we would try to measure that adoption. We would also try to measure component adoption as well, but we weren't as heavily tracking that information. Um, there's different measurements that we've developed internally on like the engineering side. Once things get developed, and we would then run scripts to see uh, if they were adopting our tokens one to one. I remember working on like dark mode specifically, and that's always like a fun thing for us to lint because we would switch interfaces to dark mode and then see where things are failing. So then we would assign tasks to designers and engineers to alert them that maybe the background color of this different container uh, it's not switching, so it's not complying to the system.
Mhm. So, what's your decision process, for example, when you're working on multi-platform? Do you, I'm not sure if you're doing it right now in your current design system team, but do you choose, for example, the native component or can you customize it? What's the process there?
It's yeah, so both of my systems now are primarily web focused. So we would develop for web first. There's a large initiative now for internal tooling to make sure that we're support. It's still web, but we're supporting both web and mobile web properly. So we're developing measures to make sure that things are responsive at the smallest size, because people are utilizing our tools. Like Wiki is a specific tool that we have, and then there's also like other uh, article based products that are internal that we use our work phones to look stuff up. So we want to make sure that that's at least usable. Mobile native for our tooling hasn't been as much of a focus as, say, like when I worked at Disney and we had to develop for everything. I think so that's been much easier to focus specifically on web first and go from there. At Disney, it was much more difficult because we were focusing on web, native mobile devices, uh, television devices, televisions. That was a much longer tail for us.
Lots of things to test.
Yeah, too many things.
So, when do you decide that a component needs to be, that it's needs to be a sunset, that you don't no longer need it, or you need to change it? Does this ever happen, or you just update the current component and change the look and feel everywhere?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, this is the first team that I've been on where I've been able to approach the idea of sunsetting components. We would consider it if there's a more broad example that works for it. So if there's a component that is newer, that maybe has more functionality because we put more props into it, and it could compose this specific thing, then we would then look at how many times in the code base this occurs and whether it, I think there's like a decision on whether it occurs in something that may be easily swappable. So if it's on a specific product where like we might have a relationship with those like engineers and designers, then we would approach them and say, "Oh, we have a new version of this component. We noticed that you're like a top user of this. Like, would you be interested in swapping this out?" And we've had pretty good success in those cases when we have relationships with people. In other cases where there might be a legacy component that is not from our system, and we're looking to sunset the usage of that with our component. In that case, we have a community engineer that has been like running code mods to one replace those, and he's been doing that for the past the past year or so with great success. And uh, that's the beauty of our, like, I think that one of the best parts about being on this team is that we have that circle of community of people that are able to uh, take a look out and do stuff like code mods, do stuff like fixes, participate in the fixathons and hackathons without having like core designers and engineers owning that work completely. So yeah, those are the two ways that we've sunset things, but that's always an interesting thing because you could just elect to not sunset something and just let it live in the code base, but there's inherent risk with people finding that, specifically for engineers, if they find something. Let's say you need a selector input component. And let's say your component in alphabetical order is not first. They may select the older version and mistakenly use that on accident.
But what happens then in Figma? Do you just upgrade the not upgrade, update the library and let people know that this is the new component,
Mm,
and then they just have to
that's exactly right. Yeah, we would label them. Yeah, we would label the quite often, like we're following as we're developing and refactoring code components. We could be doing the same thing on the design side. We could be refactoring inverse, we could be refactoring a component design first, in which case, when the component gets launched in code, then we would put the triangle emoji in the component name and put upgrade available. So we don't delete the components right away. Obviously, we wait some amount of time for people to swap them, and then hopefully, as folks update, if folks update the libraries, I know it's like getting increasingly harder to see when there's library updates available. They would see, oh, how come my component changed names? There's upgrade available. What does that mean? And then they could click in and then see that there's like a newer version.
Oh, nice. That's a cool idea, yeah, for upgrade available. I always just do the red dot and then deprecate it. But upgrade
Oh, that
available
works too. Yeah.
is way more inviting.
Any signal. Yeah, any signal, we did have that. I love that you point that out. We did have another system, utilize the, emoji with, I think they use, like, they use the caution triangle also, but they used the colored version that has, like, the yellow on there, and then that scared a lot of people. And then they had to go and replace all that with, like, more gentler messaging, like a upgrade available type thing. So maybe not use the red dot if there's people that are very sensitive towards like changes.
Mm. Yeah, they're a bit scared. Um, what do you see? I mean, what's your personal opinion about AI and design systems? Because there are a lot, I mean, I guess tools are changing quite fast, but specifically for design systems, where do you think we could utilize them in a really cool and useful way or automate some tasks?
Yeah, like PJ I think follows the same idea. PJ's my podcast partner. I don't think it's as valuable from like Figma's like open canvas approach. Like I need you to generate a piece of UI. I don't think that's as useful for design systems. Where I think the usefulness comes from is automating like repeatable tasks, like changing layer names, changing maybe helping with things like auto layout, which is I think very helpful. But I haven't had the ability to use it internally, so unsure how that would work for us. AI could also help with tying documentation to the components themselves. And where I think it's the most helpful is helping you find things, helping you like we utilize AI internally to like help us with like content writing, for example. So if we write like a long blurb on the doc site, we utilize like the tooling to help us truncate, help us maybe better articulate like key points. That's most helpful for me. But the repeated tasks I think is great. Even things like, if I could, utilize, something, to look for hidden layers, for example, or like and, things that are, maybe, duplicative, linting, that's that sort of thing.
Yeah, or even enhancing accessibility layer to point out in a better or most useful way. Because accessibility, I think, a lot of teams struggle with it because it's always forgotten. Like, oh yeah, we will think about this later.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly, yeah, like, any way to do this, in the background, I think where it's very difficult, for us, and anyone that has, like, a plugin or use a plugin to lint is that you need to opt in to it, so you're relying solely on the designer to run the plugin to do the check. If the stuff is done in the background and is able to alert us, I think that is, much more helpful.
Mm. If you would have to reset your workflow right now, what would you change?
Oh, something that I'm working on right now. So
This is a
I
bit more
mentioned that
philosophical.
the system, yeah, yeah. I mentioned something about the system being around for over 5 years. So this is something that I want to record a podcast episode about. So I'll workshop some of the ideas. So it's been around for over 5 years. The Figma library specifically has been around for 5 years. Also, I went back into the Evernote history and scrolled a very long ways and saw that it's 5 years old. There's a inflection point, I believe, when a component library, specifically in Figma, has been around for 2 or more years, whether we should continue to just refactor what is existing, or whether we should put in the 6 months of effort to rebuild it. And I say this because I think the like refactoring and rebuilding of components in design only really does not impact engineering. We could do this on our own, and it doesn't hurt what engineering may be seeing. We're maybe just doing this in like an incremental fashion. So I'm in a position now where I'm auditing the library. We're going to be refactoring bits and pieces of it. Um, in my specific situation, I can't start from scratch, but it would be great if I could just go in a hole for 6 months, rebuild this thing with another designer, and then come back out with a brand new component library that utilizes like nested instances, component properties, booleans, tokens, all of that stuff properly.
Mhm. So in the current situation, you think everything's too complicated to use, or it takes a lot of space to
Oh,
make?
the more the latter. It's there's some things that are more complicated. There's a lot of things. If you could think back to where Figma was 3 to 4 years ago, it was more variant based. So you'd create variants for everything. So trimming that out. File performance has been a major issue for us now, where uh, you might open the file and you immediately may get a dialogue on the top about like a memory issue because like you're using over 60% of your memory. So that's like the immediate danger. And I assume that many of y'all, if you have a library that's been around for a while, you may be running into uh, similar issues because you just keep building. We're building incrementally on top of this, and we may not have the ability to go back and do like these large scale refactors to make sure that our libraries are performant.
Do you keep all the components in one library, or do you have one component, one file approach?
They're all in one library. Yeah, they're all in one library. All mainly right now, they're all on one page because that's how it had started. But I think the first thing is to break them out into specific pages. The second part of this is to consider, because this is what Figma just recommends, is to try to split out as much as you can. So any specific larger patterns may be split up into a separate file altogether.
Yeah, my approach is always one component, one file, and then in the end, you can still merge them. But yeah, performance wise, it's easier and also less mistakes on the. But I completely understand when Figma started this idea of libraries, we all put everything in one file. And also, the idea was that you create as many variants as possible because it's easier to pick them. But right now, yeah, you should have less of them. Um,
Yeah.
what, where do you find inspiration, or where do you learn the most from your coworkers or from the hackathons that you have, from internal advocate team, or what's your go-to when you want to learn something new?
I think the most useful alternate point of views I've been getting on how I'm building stuff is just sharing the work as often as I can personally. So um I don't like branching because branching isn't very performant, but I'll get a lot of people on our team. When I'm doing something, I'll have them check my branch and give me an idea of how they would build it because I think luckily in design systems, there's many different ways to build it. I may have like a mental model of how things have worked on my previous team, but maybe this team is building stuff a little differently. So it could be things like naming or structure or usage of props and booleans and that sort of thing. So I've been learning quite a bit on like how my team now has a standard way of building, and they've gone out of their way, like, while we've been doing some refactoring to just capture some of these things in a document to try to reference and repeat as much as possible. And that was something that I've done also where um, as I'm refactoring and building components, if I have a specific way I'm naming, I'll document that in like Google Docs. So if the next person that comes and helps, we could run through that uh, together. Inspiration, I find mostly like I read more stuff on the outside than I do inside. So much like the content from yourself, and then content, this design systems content in general on LinkedIn, I'm pretty plugged into.
Yeah, there are a lot of cool people on LinkedIn. I mean, also elsewhere that you can find relevant resources or even great ideas. Yeah. Um, what is there any
There's so
book
much
that
good
you would?
stuff out there now.
Yeah. Is there any book that you would recommend, especially for newbies or people that would like to start with design system?
Oh, let me think. Yeah, I haven't been reading as much books as much. Let me look and see. I think that that's just been happening. I think when we started in design, I would like read a lot more books because people are publishing more books now. But now folks are posting more like longer form content and say like Medium and Substack and such. So I haven't been like picking up any specific books. Obviously, the uh, Atomic Design book is like the original book that I think helps us like articulate and explain this stuff really well. One book that I thought is not specific like design system related, but is related in terms of like communication methods of articulating design decisions. That's been a very good one that I've read multiple times now. Um, in terms of design system specific books, I don't have any specific recommendations other than that.
It's a good resource for everyone would be your podcast, really, because
South
you
Air podcast, yes,
yeah.
yeah.
No, because you talked about I mean, not almost every topic, but you covered so many useful stuff and you gathered a lot of insights from all your previous work and also from PJ's experience. So it's like an immense resource for anybody that would start at episode number 1 and just listen to the end.
Thank you so
um,
much. Thank you so much.
I mean, and also you were at the Into Design Systems conference last year, and I'm sure this was not the only conference you shared your insights.
Mm.
So I would like to say that people should follow you on LinkedIn. Probably that's the best social media account.
Yeah, LinkedIn for now. If you look up Davy Fung on LinkedIn, follow me there. Yeah, I post all of the podcast things on there, and then I try to stay plugged into specifically our niche community and the into design systems community. So I like to cross post things that are from my friends that we would like to share.
Yeah, thank you so much, Davey, for your valuable insights in coming again.
Thank you
Always a
so much.
pleasure to talk to you, and we always learn a lot. So, thank you.